Welcome back to From the Bookshelf for another book club episode. We are back at it with Vampire Academy by Richelle Mead, where we will be looking at chapters 9, 10, and 11. Before we get started, don't forget to like and comment on this video and subscribe so you can get notified for any new book club episodes and the weekly downloads that come out on Saturdays, as well as anything else new going on the channel. So let's get started. Chapter 9, we're going to start on page 112. So we're still kind of talking about how in last episode, Christian, having used his fire magic to attack another student, even though he didn't really do any damage to him, it wasn't really harmful, but they used to have attack spells, clearly, because these spells exist, but they're not allowed to use them. And then, so it wasn't always that way, we used to fight right along with guardians centuries ago. The people started getting scared and stopped. Figure is safer just to hide. They forgot the attack spells. So Christian here is saying that, there were spells. They just thought it was easier and safer to hide. I'm not sure if that's really true. I mean, it depends on your definition of safe. I mean, if hiding is really considered safe, I mean, yes, it is, but to a point. But if you don't really stop the situation, it's going to keep happening, right? And we kind of see this in later books with the Strigoi. They keep attacking and they keep attacking, and if all you're doing is running and hiding, they're gonna keep coming. You kind of have to get proactive and like attack back and stop them if you really want the situation to change and to stop, right? So it all comes down to your definition of what is safer. Is safer now in the moment, or safer overall generally for everybody to come in the future. So page 114. So here we're seeing kind of this rule with magic, and it was considered every bit as wrong as using magic as a weapon. Okay, so here we kind of see some more rules for the Moroi. Okay, so here we have Rose and Lissa, and talking about the compulsion that Lissa has, right? This ability to make people do things. Her compulsion was what had allowed us to dodge authority and get along in the world without adult help. It was what had allowed us to convince the bank to let her tap into her inheritance. And it was considered every bit as wrong as using magic as a weapon. Why not? It was a weapon, a powerful one that could be abused very easily. And that makes sense, right? It can be abused, but if their compulsion is something they shouldn't use and that's wrong, like outright, why is it something they have? Why isn't the ability that they have if it's something that's so wrong? Especially in Lissa's case, where I'm into a little bit of a spoiler alert for kind of the end of this book and going forward, but Lissa H. Moroi has an affinity with a certain magic: earth, air, fire, and water. But Lissa doesn't have an affinity for any of those. Her affinity is with spirit. People don't really understand that, and they've like forgotten what that is. So she has the ability to use compulsion at like much higher rate than anyone else. She can use it on other Moroi and then just about anybody. But what is the point of this ability if it's so wrong and you're not supposed to use it? It just seems like a weird rule. I get that you shouldn't be using it to outright do horrible things, but if it's something to better the situation, why is it so wrong? Just like with the use of magic as a weapon, I don't get why that's really wrong either. It just doesn't make sense to not use the abilities you have to make your life better and the lives around you better, as long as you're not doing like harm. Like if you're using it to attack the Strigoi and just protect yourself from the Strigoi, why is that wrong? to use magic in that sense. Or if, say, you're about to get arrested or attacked by humans or something, why would it be wrong to use your compulsion to kind of save yourself from something like that in that kind of situation? And it doesn't make sense as to why they would be so set on that rule. So let's move on to page 118. So we see that at this point in the book, people have figured out that Rose was letting Lissa drink her blood while they were away because she didn't really have access to feeders and stuff. And of course, because people think it's dirty in this book, like it's a bad thing, everybody's kind of looking down on her right now. And one of her fellow Dhampirs is kind of giving her trouble and like coming, being like, well, you let this, if you let a vampire do this, well, you should let me do this kind of thing. And she says, don't, right? And he responds, you want to. His voice held excited wonder. I can tell. No, I don't. You do. And it's like, well, no. If someone says no, that means no. No means no, no matter what you think is going on. If a girl says no, it just means no. If a girl says no, it just means no. It doesn't mean anything else. Nothing else. And I guess this is realistic in the sense that a lot of boys, especially teenagers, don't necessarily listen to that. I mean, not to say that that happens all the time, but if a girl says no, it means no. But boys sometimes don't take no for what it really is. And that's a terrible thing. If a girl says no, it means no. And yeah, let's just move on. Page 123. I'm going to make a little correction. I wasn't really paying attention to where we were with the book. And in that past scene, it wasn't a Dhampir. She was actually talking to a Moroi, Jesse. And this is where he finds out that she was letting Lissa feed on her, which is how the school ends up finding out, as I was talking about previously. Because there is a scene later in the book that does happen, like as I was saying, with another Dhampir, but that hasn't happened yet. That's a little later. I guess we might get that a lot later. That might be something we'll talk about. But in this case, she was telling Jesse no, and he was like, well, I can tell you want to. She doesn't. But we're going to move on because I just wanted to correct that because I was a little bit wrong when we were talking about that. So on page 123. So Dimitri showed up when she was with Jesse, and he kicked Jesse out, told him to go back to his dorm, like, get out. Now, Dimitri's kind of giving her crap, right? And he should, because she's kind of out of line, doing stuff she shouldn't be. And he says, I hear the stories you guys tell. I've heard stories about you. Ouch, I wanted to yell back that it was none of his business what I did. And one, it's not. But two, you hear stories that teenage boys tell. Do you always believe what teenage boys say? Like, teenage boys are notorious liars when it comes to this sort of thing. Like, they make things up because they want to sound cool with their friends. Doesn't really mean it's true. It just means they say it. And I feel like Dimitri's smart enough to know that just because a teenage boy says something, that it's not something we should just automatically believe. I mean, you should always take something someone says with a grain of salt and like do your research first kind of thing. But especially when it comes to something just a teenage boy is saying, oh yeah, that happened. Okay. Do you have proof? Because I feel like Dimitri should be smarter than that. And maybe he's just a little bit jealous. So let's move on to page 126. We're going to have chapter 10, which starts on 126. So they're in another classroom with their teacher, Mr. Nagy. Nagy, I don't know how to say that, Nagy. It's Nagy. And they're passing notes. And by they, I mean Lissa and Rose. They're passing notes. And he found said notes. Mr. Nagy, legendary for his ability to humiliate students by reading notes aloud, homed in on us like a missile. He snatched the note away, and the excited class settled in for a full reading. Oh, look, another teacher bullying his students. Because that's kind of how I see this. Like, it is, in a sense, like harassment. Like, take the note, give them detention, but you don't know what's in it. You could be sharing information that nobody else needs, especially in this case. He eventually he gets to a point while he's reading that he kind of gets embarrassed by what he realizes he's sharing with the class and stops reading. But essentially, you don't know what's in it. Maybe read it first before you decide to read it out loud, because you don't know what you're going to be saying, what you're going to be divulging and telling people. Like, it could be something that you wouldn't even want to share with the class, but by the time you read it out, it's too late. In this case, it's too late. Like, you've already done it. No going back. So it's like, I think teachers in this position, that they shouldn't be abusing their power like that. That you don't need to do more than take the note away, give them detention or something else, but you don't need to be reading it aloud, especially without knowing what's in it first. And that's just my take on that kind of behavior. Let's move on to page 133. So this is kind of like a flashback. Rose is thinking on something that happened prior to them running away, where Lissa kind of picks up a dead bird and heals it, and it flies off, right? Or this raven, like, Rose is horrified. She says it's probably got a disease, but her hand moved out like she hadn't even heard me. Miss Carp stood there like a statue, her white face looking like a ghost. Lissa's fingers stroked the raven's wings. And that's when suddenly it comes back to life and flies away. But as I mentioned with the spoiler earlier, one of the things that the spirit ability allows her to do is to heal. And she doesn't know that she has this at this point. She has no idea that she's able to do this. And I wonder if this is an instinct, that she picked up the bird to heal it, like on instinct, not knowing that she could do that. Otherwise, picking up a dead bird and stroking it is a little creepy. Like, not even a little creepy, like way creepy. If you really think about it, like, who actually chooses willingly to pick up a dead bird, not knowing that they can do something to help it, to heal it? So unless this was some sort of instinct, it's just super creepy. But I'm hoping that's what it was. It was like the spirit inside her kind of urging her, because she knew that she could, like, instinctively do that. To move on to page 135. So Rose is talking about Anna and the books she's read about her. Yeah, but there wasn't much on Anna. All the books were kind of generic, just talked about him healing people, bringing them back from the edge of death. And she's talking about Vladimir. I mean, she was trying to research Anna with Vladimir healing people, kind of bringing them back to life or from the brink of death. Kind of like foreshadowing. And kind of like, remember we just saw with the Raven, Rose bringing him back to life. Another parallel there with Vladimir and Lissa and Rose and Anna, right? Let's move on to page 139. So we are now on chapter 11, and we're still going to move to 139. So it's just this cool scene that we're seeing. Rose and Dimitri are training, but also fighting, because she's learning to fight. And he says, "Go ahead, try to hit me. I didn't need to be told twice." Lunging forward, I tried to land a blow and was promptly blocked and knocked down onto the mat. So you notice here how he doesn't say hit me, but says try to hit me, because he knows that she's only going to try. Like, he knows that she's not going to be able to actually hit him. She's like gung-ho, like, oh yeah, I'm totally going to hit you. And then he knocks her on her ass. Because he knows. He says, try and hit me. go ahead and try. It's not going to work because you're only trying. You're not going to really be able to do it. I just really like that scene. It's because, like, Dimitri knows what he's capable of, and he knows how awesome he is, because all the little Dhampir teenagers are like, he's practically like a god to them. Like the Dhampir god. Just like in the sense of his fighting abilities and stuff like that. So let's move on to page 142. So in this scene, we kind of see Rose's feelings for Dimitri as she's been training with him and working with him. And she said, I was crushing on my mentor, crushing on my older mentor. I had to be out of my mind. He was 7 years older than me, old enough to be my, well, okay, nothing, but still older than me. 7 years was a lot. I agree. 7 years is a lot. And my point here is this is a reasonable age gap for it to be considered like too old, right? Especially when you're a teenager. 16, which if she's 16, that makes him what, 23? Did I add that wrong? Nope, 23. There's my math brain. It's been a long day. But yeah, so she's 16, he's 23. That is the kind of age gap where it can be considered wrong. And he's older because she's still a teenager. She's still 16. So that is a wrong age gap, right? And I bring this up and I make a point of this because a lot of YA books that I read, young adult books that I read, they make a huge point to say, oh, this guy is older than me. He's older and, you know, I can't be with him because he's older and blah, blah, blah. And like the age gap is like 2 years. Like the difference is like 16 and 18 or like 17 and 19. And it's like, that's not an awkward age gap. That's like a normal age gap. And I think the one I see this most weird is like with the Divergent series. I think he's only like 2.5 years older than her, but she's always going on in like the first book about how he's so much older and she can't be with him because he's so much older. And it's like 2 years is not that much older. That's like a normal age gap between teenagers dating. That's like not weird really that much, especially when you're like 16 or 17 years old. This is an age gap. And I don't know why, like, I feel the need to like bring this up because so many times it's like it's like 2-3 years difference. And it's like, that's not so weird. Why are we making that weird when it's not? This is, you know, but we'll get past that. They, obviously, if you've read the books, you know that they're like soulmates. They end up together, but also they end up together after, Rose is older, maybe. I don't know. I guess we'll have to keep reading. It's been a while. But point is, reasonable. A reasonable age gap to be considered too old. Unlike some people's ideas. Let's move on to page 146. So here we meet the Queen of the Moroi, because yes, royalty means that there's a queen or king. In this case, Queen Tatiana, who shows up at the school to kind of meet everybody, and she's talking about Lissa, right? And she says, you are doubly named with power. Your names represent the finest qualities people have to offer and hearken back in times to deeds of greatness and valor. She paused a moment. But as you have demonstrated, names do not make a person, nor do they have any bearing on how that person turns out. So basically, again, another adult, kind of being a bully. And not just that, but a queen. It's like, you'd think being queen would mean you'd be above the petty BS of teenage girls, but apparently not. Tatiana is like the queen of pettiness, the queen of bitchiness, and we'll see that too going forward in the series. But it's just, she's a 16-year-old girl who lost her entire family, her parents and her brother, in a car wreck, and you don't actually understand why she left. You don't know what there was behind it, because there was a purpose, there was a reason, and we'll see that. And they really didn't have a choice. And will also see that. So the fact that the queen is just automatically shaming a 16-year-old girl, like an adult, like I think in her 60s, is shaming a 16-year-old girl for what? For running away after her family is killed? Like, it's just stupid and petty, and it's the kind of BS that's like perpetuates these horrible teenagers that she has to deal with. Like, it's like, you're a queen, grow up a little bit. Let's move on to page 150. So after the queen just kind of like humiliated and shamed her in front of literally the entire school, Lissa's kind of like having this mental sort of breakdown. Like, she was literally just shamed in front of everybody because she's really your normal teenage girl, like going through a lot of crap, right? And she's not being able to deal with it, especially due to the spirit. It causes a little bit of a mental instability within her because she uses what's inside of her as opposed to what's outside. That's like part of it. So it says, there was a vulnerable look about her that I recognized and feared. Hey, I lowered my voice. Don't look like that. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Don't let this get you down. Don't do anything you shouldn't. She glanced up at me. It's going to happen again, isn't it? She whispered. Her hand still clutching the tree began to tremble. Not if you don't let it. I tried. Not if you don't let it. So here we see Lissa kind of having like an actual like mental attack, like mental instability, like, and that's kind of what happens when adults bully children. It leads to the kind of anxiety and mental stress that children don't need, because it leads to mental issues, you know, serious things. And that's why bullying in itself is wrong. But the fact that you have a grown adult doing the bullying, I think that just makes the situation even worse. As we can see, let's say here, and as Rose knows, she's had issues with this before. That's why she's saying this is something that she fears, like the way she looks. So like the way Lissa looks is something she knows well, because she's seen her get this way before. Let's move on to page 151. So Lissa's thinking about, you know, Christian and stuff like that, and Rose is kind of like in her head. And Rose says, sorry, do I need to give you the Christian's a psycho, pathetic loser talk again? I think I've got it memorized after the last 10 times. So here Rose is, again, harping on about Christian. She's like, he's a psycho, he's a loser. You need to just forget about him. And it's like, why is he a psycho and a loser? Because some teenage kid over here says so. This kid says he's a psycho, so he must be. I mean, I know she saw him with the fire thing and stuff, but it's like, why don't you take the chance to actually talk to him, get to know him, before you decide who and what he is? You don't like people judging you and deciding who you are based on things you couldn't control, and yet here you are judging him based on things he couldn't control, that being his family. You know, Rose. It's like, don't treat him the way you don't want people to treat you, because it's exactly what you're doing. She's treating him the way everyone's treating her. Let's move on to page 152. So Rose kind of spread around school about the news she learned from Mason about Mia's parents kind of being like almost like servants, how they kind of like were cleaners or gardeners or whatever to like royal families and stuff like that, and kind of embarrassed Mia. And Mia thinks someone else is spreading it, and then she says, it was you. Someone told me Jesse started it, but he couldn't have known anything about me. He got it from you. My question here is, like, she has this idea that Jesse couldn't possibly have known this about her, that there's no way Jesse could know this information, and yet somehow it seems plausible and reasonable that Rose would know this information about you. Like, she literally just met you, like, what, a month ago? 2 months max? Like, how could she know this about you? Oh, right, I know. Mia's like the most unreasonable person in the book, right? Like, she's not reasonable. She doesn't actually think about things logically. She just kind of like makes it up as she goes along, whatever suits her best. Let's go to the last point, which is on page 155. So Christian was about to go after Lissa, who is clearly upset, and Rose kind of stops him and basically tells him, Lissa wants nothing to do with you. Leave her alone. She doesn't want to talk to you. She doesn't want anything to do with you. And when we'd gone a little ways, I stole a glance behind me and saw Christian standing just outside the garden. He'd stopped walking and now stood staring down the path that led to Lissa in the courtyard. Shadows covered his face as he thought, and then after a few moments, he turned around and headed back toward the Moroi dorms. So this is kind of about Rose, like what she did. Like, she looks at Christian and she sees like he's horrible, he's evil, in a sense, and he doesn't want her, and she doesn't want him to be anywhere near Lissa, and she basically just kind of like is cruel to him, and she can see he actually cares about her, as you can see in this. You know, he kind of looks after her to where she went, and Shadows covered his face as he thought, like, he considered it as like, does she really? And then he leaves. And it's like, you literally just crushed this boy. But also, she's talking about she cares about Lissa and Lissa's feelings. But if you really cared about Lissa's feelings, you'd look to see what Lissa wants, what Lissa feels, and what she feels she needs, which is Christian. Christian makes her feel normal and safe and not anxiety-ridden. So why would you want to just push him away like that, when clearly it's something that Lissa in her feelings does want? So is it that you really do care about her feelings, or just that you care about her to the extent where you can control? I mean, you can't be with Christian because I don't like him, even if you do. And he clearly cares about you. Nope, sorry, he's evil, I don't like him. But that's that. So that's all we're going to talk about today. We will continue on with this book in upcoming episodes. Let me know what you thought. Comment down below if you agree, disagree, anything I might have missed. I'd love to talk to you about it. And until next time.